Hey everyone! Welcome to The Young and the Restless. I'm Jane, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love Young and the Restless, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in. The Young and the Restless spoilers preview video for the week of July 21st to 25th shows that Nick Newman will be placed under house arrest, while Amanda Sinclair suspects Kane Ashby of deleting evidence. YNR's weekly commercial begins with Victor Newman questioning Carter while Chance Chancellor stands nearby. When Victor asks if Kane confided in Carter about his intention to assassinate Damien, there will be questions about how far Carter went to help his boss. It is true that I would do anything for Mr. Dumas, but I did not do what you both think I did, Carter says in the weekly preview video. Next, Lily Winters and Audra Charles will be startled by a noise in the garden. It will frighten them both when Audra wonders who is there, but will it be the murderer or a false alarm? Amanda will catch Kane in the office with the video equipment and demand to know what he is doing. Kane will respond that he is merely trying to retrieve this film, and he will most likely try to access the backup after 24 hours. Please do not inform me that you are erasing evidence. That is the absolute worst thing you can do right now, Amanda warns in YNR's weekly preview video. After Amanda accuses Kane of deleting damning evidence, he will turn the question back on her, wondering if she did it instead. Carter also appears in the teaser, arriving at Nick's sleeping car with a burly guard to assist enforce what comes next. I need you to join me. In the preview clip, Carter says, I'm placing you under house arrest for Mr. Dumas' safety and the peace of mind of all the other guests. The Young and the Restless recap for Friday, July 18th, reveals that Kyle Abbott will cheat on Audra Charles, while Kane Ashby discovers that a critical piece of the surveillance tape has been deleted. On Friday's episode of YNR, Audra will arrive at Kyle's sleeping car, where he will just be wearing a towel. After Audra updates Kyle on Damien Kane's murder and the mystery surrounding it, he'll try to calm her down. Audra is concerned about how devastated Nate Hastings and Amy Lewis will be when they get the news. When Audra hears a disturbance, she gets jumpy and clutches Kyle's arm. Audra will eventually reveal she is terrified and does not want to leave Kyle's room, so he will insist she stays. When Audra admits that she feels comfortable with Kyle, she will question if she said the wrong thing. Kyle and Audra will finally contact their lips and begin kissing as they lean in closer. Meanwhile, Nick Newman will be furious that Phyllis Summers is protecting Kane when he could be sending him to prison. After Nick leaves, Phyllis will tell Sharon Newman that she is simply trying to give Kane the benefit of the doubt. Phyllis will be confident that Kane is not to blame for Damien's death after seeing the horrified expression on his face and hearing the fear in his voice. Sharon and Phyllis will conclude that none of the people who came to Nice for the party would kill Kane and frame Nick. Phyllis and Sharon will recognize that this leaves just Kane's employees. Kane will show Chance Chancellor the surveillance tape from around the time Damien was slain at the office, which is equipped with video monitors. Just before the murder, the video will become glitchy and cut out. Kane will admit he has no idea what occurred, and Chance will realize the tape has been wiped and inquire if there is a backup. After Kane says they run a backup every 24 hours, he'll point out that it hasn't run yet. Chance will inquire who else has access, and Kane will admit that only Carter and Amanda Sinclair do. Although Chance will be suspicious that Kane deleted the footage, Kane will insist that he did not. In the dining room, Billy Abbott will inform Jack Abbott and Diane Jenkins Abbott of Damien's death. After Billy advances the argument that Kane is after Damien because of Lily Winters, Jack will be even more outraged that Billy wants to work with him. Kane will appear to declare his innocence and insist that he was the intended target, not Damien. Billy will begin to transfer blame to the Newmans, prompting Kane to admit that he believes Nick would go to any length to protect his family, and that the Newmans would do the same. Back with Chance, he will notify Nick that the security tape was cut moments before the murder occurred. Nick will not be startled and will seriously question that Kane summoned the cops because they will still not be present. Chance will wonder what else Nick expects him to accomplish, but Nick believes Chance requires assistance from the proper authorities. Nick will become frustrated with Kane's trickery and will offer that he walk down the mountain himself to get the cops. As Kane, Billy, Jack, and Diane appear, Nick will hint at seizing charge of the game and warn Kane that he will blow the whole thing wide open before anyone else is wounded. Carter's decision to place Nick under house arrest sent shockwaves through their social circle, leaving friends and family struggling to make sense of the abrupt and severe disciplinary action. The tension between the two had been growing for months, but no one anticipated Carter to take such drastic measures, effectively isolating Nick to his home with stringent regulations and little interaction with the outside world. The reasons for the house imprisonment were initially unclear, with Carter offering little explanation beyond vague references to lost trust and frequent transgressions of boundaries. Those close to Nick, on the other hand, thought there was more to the story, as rumors of intense clashes and unresolved issues circulated. Nick, for his part, was both resigned and indignant, swinging between stoic acceptance and outbursts of rage at what he saw as unjust punishment. The house, once a haven of luxury and pleasure, had become a gilded cage, with Nick pacing the halls like a trapped animal, his every move monitored and his independence taken away. Carter, for his part, remained solid in his judgment, claiming that the steps were necessary to teach Nick accountability and prevent further escalation of whatever misdeeds had led to this point. Friends who attempted to intercede found themselves caught in the middle, with some agreeing with Carter, saying that Nick had brought this on himself, and others sympathizing with Nick, seeing the house imprisonment as an overreaction that would only worsen their gap. The psychological toll on Nick grew more obvious as the days evolved into weeks. Isolation weighed heavily on him, and his typically lively demeanor faded under the strain of captivity. Carter, despite his outward resoluteness, secretly grappled with remorse, questioning whether he had gone too far, but eventually persuaded himself that tough love was the only way to get through to Nick. The chemistry between them evolved radically, with their once easy companionship giving way to a tight, guarded relationship in which every interaction felt filled with hidden animosity. Nick's attempts to bargain for more freedom were greeted with firm refusals, and Carter's infrequent attempts to relax the regulations were hampered by his worry that leniency would damage the gains he believed the house arrest was making. Outside onlookers wondered on the long-term consequences of such a punitive attitude, with some claiming that it would push Nick to pondering change, while others worried that it could foster long-term hostility. The scenario was exacerbated by the fact that Nick and Carter were more than simply friends. They shared a deeper, almost familial tie, making the power imbalance inherent in the house arrest even more unpleasant. Nick's family, initially unaware of the gravity of the situation, were increasingly concerned as they saw his morale deteriorate, and some began to encourage Carter to rethink. Carter, on the other hand, stayed steadfast, believing that he was working in Nick's best interests, even as the emotional toll became increasingly difficult to bear. The house arrest also had practical consequences, hurting Nick's career, social life, and mental health as he was cut off from the routines and people that had formerly kept him grounded. Carter, meanwhile, faced his own set of issues, reconciling the obligations of enforcing the house arrest with the emotional load of knowing he was to blame for Nick's misery. The tension between them reached a breaking point one evening when Nick, in a state of despair, attempted to flee the house, resulting in a confrontation that revealed the depth of their disagreement. Carter, confronted with Nick's sorrow, was forced to consider the idea that his strategy had failed, trapping both of them in a cycle of control and rebellion. In the aftermath, a hesitant communication began, with Nick expressing his suffocation and Carter admitting his own anxieties and frustrations. The house imprisonment, which was originally intended as a corrective measure, had turned into a crucible, testing the limits of their relationship and pushing them to confront hard truths about power, trust, and forgiveness. It was unclear if the experience would ultimately strengthen or weaken their friendship, but one thing was certain: Nick's house arrest had irreversibly altered their chemistry, leaving scars that would take time to heal. The incident sparked broader debates on the ethics of using confinement as a form of discipline, particularly outside the context of legal or parental authority, and whether such methods can ever fully achieve their intended purpose without creating collateral damage. For Nick and Carter, house imprisonment was more than simply a temporary limitation. It was a watershed moment in their relationship, shaping their interactions long after the rules were lifted and the doors were eventually unlocked. The lessons learned, however, were not what Carter had hoped for. Rather than imposing discipline, the experience revealed the fragility of trust and the hazards of unilateral authority. Nick, while humbled by the event, emerged with a greater sense of self-awareness, pledging to rectify the behaviors that had led to the house arrest but also resenting the harshness with which it had been imposed. Carter, meanwhile, struggled with the idea that his good intentions had been eclipsed by his methods, leaving him wondering if there could have been a better way to guide Nick without resorting to such drastic means. The house arrest eventually became a cautionary tale about the complexities of relationships and the narrow line between discipline and dominance, a reminder that even the most well-meaning interventions can have unexpected repercussions when implemented without mutual understanding and respect. As the dust settled, Nick and Carter were left to pick up the pieces, dealing with the consequences of an encounter that strained their friendship in ways neither could have predicted. Carter's decision to place Nick on house arrest acted as a striking example of how power imbalances can warp even the most intimate relationships, and how the path to redemption is frequently strewn with mistakes and misunderstandings. Only time would tell whether they would emerge from the ordeal stronger or forever changed by the scars it left behind, but one thing was certain: the echoes of that decision would linger long after the house arrest had ended, a silent testament to the long-lasting impact of choices made in the name of care and control. Kyle Abbott never imagined it would come to this, but there he was, standing in Audra Charles's apartment, the early morning light pouring through half-closed curtains, his shirt crumpled on the floor, and guilt weighing heavily on his chest. He had crossed a boundary the night before, propelled by a mix of rage, perplexity, and a desperate need to feel wanted, and vowed never to do so again. Kyle's marriage to Summer had been dangling by a thread for months, frayed by jealousy, treachery, and miscommunication, but this was the type of decision that not only harmed a relationship, but destroyed it. Audra, sharp-eyed and seductive, knew precisely what she was doing. She recognized Kyle's fragility, the bitterness he tried to hide under confidence, and she exploited it. She didn't make him do anything, but she did open the door and smiled as he passed through. Her touch lacked affection and was more about tactics. Audra always played chess while everyone else played checkers, and Kyle had become just another pawn in her game, willful, irresponsible, and tragically short-sighted. But Kyle had no idea that someone had their eyes on that penthouse, waiting for an opportunity to gain power, and that person was Kane Ashby. Kane had been quietly studying Audra for the past few weeks, suspecting her complicity in Damien's abduction as well as the series of machinations involving the Newman boardroom and Chancellor Winter's shakeups. He didn't trust Audra as far as he could throw her, and Kyle, tied by blood to the Abbotts and by history to Summer, was a wild card Kane couldn't afford to overlook. So he installed a backdoor into the security system of the building Audra resided in, hoping to intercept whispers of her scheming, talks that could be used to piece together her larger plan. He didn't expect to see Kyle sneaking into her flat late at night, peering around cautiously before closing the door behind him. Kane didn't believe it at first, thinking it was a mistake, a business meeting that ran late, or a moment of weakness, but the following few hours of tape left no room for interpretation. The intimacy, the way they moved together, the passion, the betrayal, it was all there, cold and obvious. Kane realized right away that he was holding something explosive. This wasn't merely a scandal, it was a weapon. But Kane was not irresponsible. He knew that time was crucial. If he played this too quickly, Kyle might interpret it as a mistake. Audra would crawl out of it, as she usually did. But if Kane waited and looked deeper, he would find out why. Why now? Why Kyle? And, more importantly, what were they hiding? The next morning, Kane returned to his encrypted server, ready to download the footage and store it safely before choosing what to do with it. But, as he opened the encrypted file folder, his heart sunk. The files were gone. Every scrap of footage from the last 72 hours has been deleted. Not corrupted or misplaced. Deliberately erased. Kane's hand stopped on the keyboard, his breath short as the implication sank in. Someone knew. Someone noticed the feed and went to tremendous measures to destroy the evidence. That type of access was not casual, it was surgical. Whoever did it had the resources, insider knowledge, and motivation to keep Kyle and Audra's secret hidden. Kane didn't believe it was a coincidence. This wasn't just a failed love affair, it was part of something much more sinister. He searched through the system logs, looking for indications of remote access, and sure enough, the digital fingerprints were there, subtle, nearly undetectable, but present. The hack began from an unregistered device and was routed through many proxies, a professional job. Kane had witnessed identical tactics employed in corporate espionage in Australia, and the thought that someone in Genoa City was employing the same methods chilled his blood. Was it Audra? Possibly. But Kane knew when a job was too clean for her to do alone. She might have had assistance, someone with the technological knowledge and motivation to defend her, or possibly Kyle. In any case, Kane had become a menace, making him a target. He sat back in his chair and rubbed his temples, his mind whirling. He couldn't go to the police, yet. Without proof, it would simply sound like another revenge dream. Besides, the damage had already been done. The footage was gone. However, this did not imply that the truth was revealed. Kyle and Audra had committed a tremendous mistake, and no amount of wiping could reverse the ripples it would cause throughout the city. Kane needed to move carefully, gain allies, and delve deeper. He approached Phyllis, knowing her past with both Kyle and Audra, and knowing that her devotion to her daughter Summer may make her a formidable ally. Phyllis was sharp, nasty when provoked, and completely fearless. She didn't even flinch as Kane showed her the server records and described what he discovered. She simply nodded, her mouth hardening into a harsh line. "We're going to burn them to the ground," she whispered, her voice low and deadly. Kane believed her. Meanwhile, Kyle attempted to return to normalcy, but remorse clouded his every move. He avoided Summer's gaze, cringed at her touch, and immersed himself in his work, thinking it would distract him from what he'd done. But Audra wasn't as subtle. She began attending the same events, brushing past him in hallways and allowing her fingers to linger on his arm for just a second longer. She didn't say anything directly, but the message was clear: she had no intention of keeping this private indefinitely. For her, the affair was more than just a slip, it was a bargaining tool. Kyle started to panic. He contemplated telling Summer the truth before someone else might use it against him. But every time he tried, the words would die in his throat. He saw the pain in her eyes, the hope she still held onto, and he couldn't bring himself to ruin what little they had left. But secrets like that do not remain hidden, especially in Genoa City. And as Kane and Phyllis dug deeper, they found more than they expected. Financial records connect Audra to a mysterious consulting firm that received undisclosed payments from Tucker McCall. Hotel records indicate Kyle had secret encounters with an unknown third party weeks before the incident. It wasn't just an impulsive betrayal, it was part of a larger pattern, including deliberate risks and desperate decisions. Summer eventually noticed the shift. Kyle couldn't look her in the eyes. He cringed every time Audra's name came up. She was not foolish. She confronted Phyllis, who initially attempted to deflect but was ultimately unable to conceal the facts. It came out in fragments, like glass breaking on the floor, with each word piercing deeper than the last. Summer's sadness was palpable. She did not shout. She did not cry. She just walked out. Kyle attempted to follow, but she turned on him with a hollow stare that halted him in his tracks. "You didn't just cheat," she replied. "You betrayed our entire life." And then she was gone. Audra, ever the survivor, attempted to spin the narrative in her favor, but Kane had finally connected enough links to go public. They created a report with Phyllis's assistance, focusing on the dangerous relationships that were forming behind closed doors rather than the affair itself. Audra's loyalty to Tucker, Kyle's unbridled ambition, and the security breach that destroyed the tape all contributed to a picture of systematic corruption and manipulation. Lily, Devon, and even Victor were forced to deal with the aftermath. The personal became political, and Kyle found himself alone, ashamed, and losing everything he believed he was preserving. But Cain was not pleased with simply exposing them. He sought justice. Not just for Damien, but for everyone Audra and Kyle had trampled in their quest for dominance. He didn't have the tape, but he did have background, motive, and a network of people willing to speak up. It started with whispers, then headlines, and finally boardroom doors slamming shut. Kyle was requested to step down from crucial projects. Audra was suspended pending an investigation. And Cain, whom many had discarded as washed up or bitter, stood strong amid the maelstrom he'd created. Yet he did not smile. He did not celebrate. Because the truth, no matter how powerful, did not heal the wounds it exposed. Kyle and Audra's betrayal had far-reaching consequences, including damaged trust and fractured families. Genoa City would remember this period as a reckoning rather than a scandal. And Cain Ashby would remember that justice was not always hailed with acclaim. It came with silence and the understanding that you did what needed to be done, even if the cost was high.